So here's the muffler. It doesn't look like it's in great shape, but you know, it doesn't matter. Mufflers can be rough, rusty, like all heck, and they're totally fine. What you do need to check is the spark arrestor. And there are plenty of guys that actually put additional muffler mods on here, but if you're actually logging with the thing as opposed to just cutting cookies for a get-together saw, if you're actually logging with the thing, ideally you need a spark arrestor. Otherwise you can get into trouble and you can set forest fires. So, don't do that. There goes the spark arrestor. So I took the screw out. Here's the spark arrestor. It's clean. Sometimes these things actually get clogged, but this is clean, and it's probably clean. Probably because I cleaned it last time I had this apart. So now inside of here, a couple of muffler bolts. So let's put those aside for the moment. So inside of here, there's a hole. And what are the odds I'll be able to show you? Probably pretty small. Oh, you can see that. Look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge that hole just a little bit. Get a little bit more cross-sectional area there. And you want about, I think it's about 70% of the cross-sectional area of this for the muffler. So I'm just going to hog that out with a round carbide. There. So I'll get this in there and it'll be fine. So I've got the muffler, the hole in there is opened up a bit, just to give a little extra space. So I'm going to put the spark arrestor back. Those are a little tricky sometimes. Grease on this little bolt is important. Also important to not lose this little guy. Sorry, spark arrestor seated. Little screw goes in. Muffler bolts. Red Loctite on the muffler bolts. Has to be red Loctite. These things come loose, and it's bad. So red Loctite to put the muffler bolts on. And now we're going to do the exhaust gasket and heat shield. Now these have been port matched, so the size of the exhaust port coming out of the cylinder is the same size as this, which is the same size as the muffler. We're going to want to tighten these by hand so you know exactly how tight they need to be. Definitely one thing you don't want to strip out. And you definitely don't want to have these loose either. Perfect. Keep moving along here. Grease on the spark plug. Actually, anti-seize is best. Be careful, you can strip that out too, which is a problem. So don't do that. Oh, why did I install that? Don't install the spark plug. Check the compression first. Among other things. Check squish, check compression. Makes sense, right? The chain brake handle here, let's put the spring on first. Spring goes in. Again, I put grease on the bolts. Again, light torque on these. If you put them down too tight, either you're going to strip them out, or sometimes this don't move. Always check that. Make sure you have good spring on there. Handle. This little plastic piece from the beginning. Don't forget that, that actually goes on here. Again, grease on these bolts. In this case, this is metal on plastic, so metal screw into the plastic AV mount. So how much to... on the bottom. And this always worries me because these are a little on the short side. So it definitely worries me for stripping these out, but I have not yet stripped one of these out. So you hold this with your thumb, get that aligned. Essentially, you got a saw pretty much ready to go at this point. Let's check the compression. I'm checking compression. I'm doing this off camera. You install the compression tester in the spark plug hole. You put a clamp on the throttle to hold it full throttle. Put your foot on the saw and give it a pull, and don't forget to have the decomp off. I'm only getting nearly 160 pounds of compression, so that weirds me out a little bit. Let's check the squish. I thought for sure we'd get a little more than that. Make sure the squish is on here. Now this is not broken in yet, so that's certainly an issue. The other saw had, when it broke in, it was nearly 180. But let's check the squish, which I probably should have done before I checked the compression. So I'm checking squish between 20 and 19 thousandths. Perfect. Check it on the exhaust side, 22. So, pretty good. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to assume that this thing runs. And let's put the rest of it together, just so we'll see how we do that. I'm going to assume that this is going to run. spark plug in. Good. Again, don't want to strip out the spark plug. Throttle linkage works fine. Top cover. Top cover. Seems to work okay. I think these saws are balanced best with a 16-inch bar and chain. I'm willing to bet after this we can really, it'll really be good, but you could run it maybe, you know, an 18, 20 without too much trouble. But balance is not going to be good if you're pushing it like that. Too loose. Still a little too loosey-goosey. That should be good right about there. Hold it up. And I'm going to check this with a ratchet just for the feel. That runs nice. Saws back together. So it doesn't run. Figured out why. See the spark plug? No gap. Why? Because this is actually hitting the top of the piston. There's your mark on the top of the piston where that stupid spark plug hit. Now again, I checked the squish, so that's not a problem. But never heard of a spark plug hitting before, so it's a mystery. I know what I'll do. I'll put an extra washer on the plug. Maybe that'll help. Let's do that. So I actually stole a washer off of this plug, and by the way, the plugs I'm using are the NGK BPMR 7As. I found a really good deal on Amazon on these. Buy them like 20 at a time. But I put 2 washers on this. Let's see if that actually helps. Because if we can maintain a gap, we can hopefully maintain a spark. If we maintain a spark, then we actually might get the saw to start. Still no starty. I'll get this figured. So I've got fuel. I do have spark. The flywheel key is not sheared. I checked that. So as an aside, when I'm putting things back together, again, torque wrench on the flywheel, blue Loctite. When I put the ignition coil down, put a business card between, or a piece of paper thickness, between the ignition coil and the flywheel, and then cinch it down. And that's how you do that. So you can cinch both the bolts down like that. And when you're cinching both the bolts down, you really need to have one of these ball end Allens. Which you cannot use an impact with, by the way, it'll shear it off. Did that. That's fine. So it runs. Carb needed to be cleaned out. So, yeah, that's how that goes. So what I'm going to do now is start it for you. Ta-da, works. So I'll hand it to Dad, see what he thinks. So there it is, a fully put together 350. So you can see the process start to finish. And pretty much bolt for bolt. Hope you like the video. I'll keep everybody apprised as to how the thing cuts, but I'm a little disappointed with the compression number. I want to check it later and see exactly where we end up there. Saw needs quite a bit of fuel, so if you're trying to tune this thing, you gotta give it some fuel, and that way you can get it to idle right and come off idle pretty good and whatnot, accelerate right and all that stuff. To close out my 350 video, I wanted to show some tools that I use and give you a little preview of things to come. So clearly this is not staged, it's not organized, it's how it looks right now. But as you can see, I've got my makeshift bench here, my actual bench, which is full of junk, and my toolbox, which is full of goodies. So let me just go through a couple of things that I use that was important in the video and go from there. So this is a 350 that I built for me. It has ceramic bearings in it, and this is the other Hyway 350. So I'm going to work on this and see if I get similar numbers and all that other stuff. See where that one ends up. I didn't have a degree wheel when I put this together, so I'm going to put this on the degree wheel and see where we end up there. This is a 372 that I picked up today, and that should be fun to play with. Pieces, parts, and whatnot. So, tools. One thing that you might have seen me mess with are these the Bosch tools. Now this is not an impact, it just is a drill driver. It has a torque setting on it, and I had two of these, and my dad tried them and he bought two, and my uncle tried them and he bought two. I know that new ones exist that are actually more powerful than this. I know Milwaukee has one, I think it's called the Fuel, and it's even more powerful than this. But frankly, this is just fine. It uses the Bosch 10.8 batteries. Effectively, it's a 12-volt battery, the lithium-ion batteries. And they go to a lot of different things. So they've got an entire lineup of stuff, including an oscillating tool, and my other goodie that I'm going to show you, which is in here, and I won't have to pull it out, is the Dremel that I use, which is the Bosch cordless Dremel. Just got this as a replacement for my Black & Decker RTX tool. So far I really like it, but it was really expensive, and it had to be imported from Italy. There's no US sellers of this tool. You had to actually bring it in from Italy, so on eBay. And of course we have an assortment of carbides, and the carbides come from also an eBay find, and it's a round diamond that I happen to use for working on doing bevels. Going through the toolbox here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I did want to show some of the important tools, things that I use. I like these Harbor Freight sets with the really long Allens, and I've actually got the ball end ones, which are here, and the non-ball end ones. I've got both, and I don't use the ball end ones very much because you can indeed shear that end off, but I do like them for getting into tight spaces. I mainly use these guys, and they are lifetime warranty. So if you have an issue, just walk back into Harbor Freight. I did actually have the issue. I sheared that one off with the impact. It was stupid of me. I shouldn't have done that. It was too much torque on that. But I sheared it off with the impact, and I walked in, and they just exchanged it. No questions asked. No problem. Other important tools. Happen to have a Harbor Freight set of T-handles. The T-handles are important to have for making sure you don't over tighten stuff, and you just get a better sense with those rather than using any other wrench. You do need a torque wrench too, which I do happen to have, but that's not necessarily one of the cool tools. Incidentally, made that guy the other day. This is for removing clutches, as opposed to the way I was doing it, which you could see with a pipe wrench. Now I can use this. It's just a 1/2-inch socket. This one happens to be 13/16. It fits quite well over the clutch. Let's remove that. Now the tool you need, solder. 0.8 millimeter diameter is what this is. I think this is about 30 thousandths without, it's perfect for measuring squish. And I also happen to have some stuff that is, I believe, 60 thousandths. Another thing I find handy, just the magnetic trays. Best place to buy these is not Harbor Freight. Best place to buy those is actually Pep Boys, believe it or not, because they have assortments. I think it's 4 for $9.99. So you get the big one, the medium, and the tiny, and that works. That works for me. Need a set of tap and dies. I got a couple of sets actually, but this was like 35 bucks on eBay for a full set. So allows you to make the degree wheel, and help me make that, and of course I got a lot of other miscellaneous stuff in here too, but the tap and dies definitely help on occasion. Different types of pointy noses are helpful. I like a number of different ones, but you have to have multiple different sets of pliers. I love these Cooper tools, Exolite. They just feel so good in your hand. They're not particularly powerful for grabbing anything, but boy do they feel good, and you know, if you're doing little stuff, they're just brilliant. And they have nippers, and these are the really kind of fine nippers. They have more heavy duty ones. The Nip X is of course the high-end stuff. I don't find that they fit as great in my hand, but if you really need something that's heavy duty and will last a lifetime, that's the stuff. The lineman's pliers I usually use are these, which are probably cheap. I don't even remember where I got these. They feel better in my hand and tend to work better for me. Need to have an assortment of small sockets and a 3/8 inch torque wrench. Cool tools I like, my gear wrenches. I love these ratcheting wrenches. These sets, they're cheapest to buy in the set for sure. Boy, are these nice for working on anything and everything. There are certainly jobs that would be basically impossible without them. If I'm working on the car, for sure. On the chainsaws, not so much. Have to have anti-seize? Have to have it. No choice. Works really well. And grease. I'm not so sure whether one grease works better than any other for what I'm doing, but I use the expensive stuff anyway. This again I got from Pep Boys. It was not cheap. Nylon rope, cool tool. It works as a piston stop. It works just fine, depending on what you're doing. It definitely does not ruin the piston. You do have to be careful that you don't get this kind of jammed out the exhaust, because that can happen. But by and large, if you move the piston past the exhaust and jam this in, it works very well as a piston stop and doesn't really hurt anything. That's a wire lead I have. I got about 1 million of them, but a wire lead is helpful if you're testing spark and a spark plug. If you're undoing the plug and you're testing spark outside of the compression chamber, then you have an issue of starting a fire, just so you know. So make sure you don't have any fuel lying around that can ignite with that spark. Here's another cool tool, a chain file. My dad had an old Homelight one that just seemed to work really well. This is a Chinese copy of it off of eBay. We actually retapped these holes for something with a little finer thread and added nuts with the MIG welder, so that grips a little better on the file. This is my random orbital sander. I usually keep this thing plugged in and ready to go. You never know what you need to sand with it. It really is quite handy to have ready to go at any and all times with a good assortment of pads. I use this to clean up the underside of the base plate adapter, the underside of the bearing cup there, and it just did a beautiful job in a very short amount of time. Last but not least, one of my favorite cool tools is my DeWalt Impact. This happens to be the 18 volt XRP, but I believe it does go for the other format as well. I think it's 20 volt lithium ion or 18 volt lithium ion, I don't know. Anyway, I've got the 18 volt XRP kit, so this is a smaller head, and boy is it torquey. It takes lug nuts off, and if you're taking bar nuts off on a chainsaw, it really does do it quite quickly. Love this tool. I've gotten tons of use out of it. It's featured in some of my other videos. Go out and buy one of these, even if it's not DeWalt. The DeWalt tends to be nice, and I happen to have the kit. I've not had any issues with this one, but I highly encourage you to, if you don't have something like this, a cordless Impact, you just gotta have one. Boy, are they handy for your average DIYer. Need the air stuff too. The air impacts are really important too, because they're double the torque that this is. But if you got to get into a tight spot, you don't want to have that air cord hanging around you, this is really nice to have. Love this tool. Gee, I really need to clean up. You think? I'll get this all cleaned off, maybe even tonight, depends on how ambitious I am. Because I got a couple of projects here that are itching. This 372 I'm really excited to see. It was not too expensive. But it's been used, so we're gonna have a good old time with this and a good old time with that. If there's anything of interest, I will keep you guys posted. Thank you so much for watching this video. This has been a long video. This has so far taken me hours upon hours upon hours to do. So thank you for watching and putting up with me the whole time. If there's any other cool tools, I will keep you posted on them. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.